The rain here has more or less died down.
Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Thunder. Hmm. Marco.
That'd be me, Johnny. And then I'll pass it on to Charo to introduce the speakers, and then she'll take it from there. I'm just gonna hack around. Thanks.
So, folks, please don't fault me if I suddenly scream on my end in case there's a cockroach that suddenly comes out of the woodworks here.
Charo, sorry. We might want to fix your mic a little bit again. Started like the volume started like yeah. That's okay.
Done?
Test.
Good?
Yeah,
Okay.
better.
Yeah. Because I keep looking at the other screen.
Hello, guys. Good evening. Welcome to another, episode. I don't know how to call this. Another Go Manila Monday. So we're doing something a little bit different this time around. We're doing sort of like a panel. And the topic for tonight is observability of your Go applications. So I am going to let Charo do most of the hosting for tonight because this is a highly technical topic and I am not a technical person. Well, I mean, not in Go. So yeah, I hope you're safe. I think it's a pretty stormy night tonight, so hope you're all safe. And Charo, would you do the honors of introducing our panelists for tonight's Go Manila Monday?
Okay. Hi, everyone. So, welcome to Go Manila Monday. So, it's another Monday night of, and our stuff, right? What are we going to do right now is pretty much different. So, instead of just having one speaker, we're going to have a panel to discuss on observability. Now, if you're a developer who has not heard of what observability is, it's usually, especially when it comes to distributed programming like microservices or whichever, you usually you usually need to take note of what's happening with all the apps that is going in your system. Uh, so this is what we will be talking about right now. So on our panel, we have from Food Panda, Mr. Ben Sarmiento. Okay. And then we also have from Brancas, we have uh, Oliver Powell, Gazni Natarsha, and Chad Kunde. All of them are currently systems engineers, senior systems engineers from Brancas. All right. So what we're going to do right now, just one moment, just need to bring up something here. Okay. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to have 10 minutes per panelist to discuss what they are doing in their own companies on how they actually implement observability among their system applications. Then after all the panelists uh, have gone through their 10 minutes, have finished discussing what they're talking about, then we would be having a pretty much a very short discussion on further discussion among the panelists and myself on what's happened on what would be better ways of you know doing observability. You can also ask your questions. So we have Slido. I don't know if we're going to show this on. Can we show this up? Can we show up this on screen right now? No. Wait. Okay. Let me just share my screen. So we have this one. Okay. So you could go to slido.com, or just simply, if you have a phone, you could scan the QR code there and then enter the code number 40196. You could ask your questions here. So you could continue posting questions while everyone else is talking. And then we would get back to your questions after all the panelists have spoken and when we're doing our Q&A. All right? So let me just move out. Okay, now I have a problem here. There we go. All right. So to start off, we're going to have Ben kick off with how he does or how they do observability, or uh, how they track what's happening with their own applications in Food Panda. Ben?
Hey, um, right. So I'm not sure if I can share my screen, right? But I'll just probably just talk about what or how we are doing things. So I guess I'm not sure if this might apply or not apply for everyone, but we are using like SaaS products for doing observability. mainly Datadog and New Relic. So in Food Panda, we're doing a microservice setup, and every team is assigned to one or more microservices. And these microservices live inside a Kubernetes platform that are hosted in AWS. And we have most of these microservices, they are either REST API servers or gRPC servers. And yeah, so we have, as I've said the last time, our microservices are using just the HTTP the library of Golang, the standard library one. And we make heavy use of context and logging middleware. So like when a when a microservice receives a request, we generate a request ID. We pass everything in the context, all the external calls, all the um, could be like a database call or an external HTTP request call to another microservice, and we put everything into the context. We use this library called uh, Print. I think it's called PP, or yeah, it's called Pretty. I'll share the link on the chat here. It's on GitHub, kr/pretty. And we use that to pretty print all the variables that we pass into the context. And then um, at the end of the request, before we send the response to the user or the client, we have a logging middleware. So all our logs are stored in std out. So I think I'm not sure what how we store that, but like yeah, Datadog can already get the logs from std out, and from Datadog we can, or from Datadog or New Relic, we can already build dashboards and alerts using these two tools alone. So I think that's the good thing about using um, a SaaS for observability, because everything related to observability you can already do here. So for example, in New Relic, there's already APM or application performance monitoring. Inside APM, you have errors, you have transactions, you have what else? Logs. Same with Datadog. I think for Datadog, instead of transactions, they're using something called traces. Um, and instead of applications, they have services. And we have I mean, for our company, we're using both because I think most of the teams are migrating to Datadog anyway. But we have built the same charts that we have built on New Relic Insights to Datadog as well. So in Datadog, there's this thing called dashboards where you can it's like Tableau, right? Like, but more developer friendly, I guess. And um, yeah, I think that's the gist of it. We have some standards set for logging. I think for a big company like Foodpanda, where we have hundreds of developers, um, I think standards are very important because all the logs, all these performance tracking are stored in just one place, which is Datadog. So it's very important how you would set the standards for logging, like what log levels are accepted, what key parameters or key attributes are needs to be sent or are required every time a request is logged, and whether you should log customer data or not. So all those things are put in a document that we call that's just the logging standards, I guess, or observability standards. And yeah, so it says here what the parameters are, what the different levels are, and yeah, mostly those. So there's also a recommended library section. I think it's pretty everyone knows about Logros, but from I think since last year, or I think it was only last year that Logros was put into maintenance mode, and so we have adopted another library called ZeroLog. And I mean, that doesn't mean that Logros being maintenance mode doesn't mean that it's gonna perform less than ZeroLog, but it's just that we saw that with ZeroLog, we can play around with other approaches of logging in our applications. Um, I think that's it. That's most of what I can share right now. I mean, I'd love to share the dashboards, but I'm not sure if can I share my screen or no or not? I can. Okay, okay. Right. So yeah. So this is how it looks like on our dashboard. So this is New Relics APM. You see the yellow graph here. These are the requests sent to DynamoDB, and the blue ones are um, yeah, this is Golang's runtime. And like as you can see, since like last time we talked about like geohashing, and like mostly the location tracking is spent inside DynamoDB, so we don't do that processing in Go anymore. These are like public API calls, by the way, so I think yeah, it's safe to share. Let me check this. Yeah, not that, but and yeah, other calls like these are like transactions being sent to the whole platform, and this is the standards document that I was talking about like all the microservice teams should follow. And again, the library is this one. So yeah, this kr slash pretty, and this is what we use for yeah, prettifying prettifying variables before we log them. So what do we log? There is usually external calls. So we just pass everything into context. So external calls, database calls, what else? I think yeah, that's mostly it. So we just pass the whole request, like the request object itself. We just pass it into the context with its own attribute. And something that I did not really realize before I joined Foodpanda. I mean, only in Foodpanda because the company was so big. Like, it's very important to set a proper name spacing on your logs because it will get pretty messy when you have so much. So yeah, name spacing was something that I thought was just for like package naming and stuff. But yeah, apparently it's also very important in logs. Another thing is, I guess, the request ID. So this is mostly for debugging specific requests. Like we saw the importance of this when we received some emergencies related to orders. Like those orders will have an order ID, and this with the order ID we can get the request ID, and then we can trace all the way back from the first request that the user has made, something like that. Because the thing is the order flow will flow from one microservice to another. So it's very important that the X request ID remains constant throughout that flow. So yeah, what else here? Yeah, this is the ZeroLog I was talking about, but yeah. We are using this right now, but I think before we joined, the standard was Logros. I think that's it for my end.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Ben. So again, if anyone has any questions, you could move over to Slido. We have it on the screen right now, or rather, we have it on the group chat right now. So just go to slido.com. Go to slido.com and just enter the code 40196. All right. Oops. All right. Okay. So okay, next we have who's on my screen right now. Okay. So next we have Oliver, who will be talking about how
Hello.
yeah, he's going to be talking about how they do it on Brancas as well. For anyone who doesn't know yet, Brancas is a fintech company, financial technology company, who's also been doing a lot of open bank APIs right now. So it'll be very interesting on how they're able to they're able to observe how their systems are working right now. Okay, Oliver?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to talk for 10 minutes on what we do because it's not too complicated. We basically just use the standard Prometheus Grafana for our logging. We don't use any third-party services really. So we instrument some of our apps, and we based also on Kubernetes. We host on Google Cloud. So we get a lot of observability for free, I guess, because our logs, for example, are just standard loggers to Stackdriver. And then the Prometheus stuff is just pretty much the stuff that comes from Kubernetes. And then we also do some extra stuff with Grafana because you can hook up directly to SQL databases. So for things like transactions for clients, we just connect directly to the database and just pull transactions and graph them like that for the business. I'm not sure if I can show off anything, so probably won't be screen sharing. Yeah, that's about it. There's nothing really fancy.
Okay, so since I think since Gazni and Chad are also on Brancas, is there anything that is there anything you want to add, Gazni or Chad, with regards to how you do observability in Brancas?
Yeah, in terms of so basically, like Oliver said, so those are the things that we keep, up in the time, like for operational monitoring, like show how many requests that came, and then how many of them like 500, and how many of them are like 401 or whatnot. So we put them as an application monitoring to see how many requests to process and all that through Grafana. But in terms of how applications are like talking to each other and how we are processing the incoming request from the user, so typically our services are like deployed as a microservices, and so we have lots of microservices that sort of talk to each other, and then we get a request from outside world that kind of uses the gRPC stream and gRPC platform. So any request that's coming in, our stack are pretty much gRPC, and then we have a proxy, like an HTML, it's the gateway proxy, gRPC gateway. We use it to expose the services. So any request that comes in, hit to the gRPC interceptor and whatnot, and it creates its own correlation ID for the request. And then, like Sam said, we are also building some of the variables that are sort of reused and put them in a context, such as your validation, like access token, and some of the useful metadata about the request. And we put them in a context, and sort of goes to the implementation for the gRPC based implementations. So we pretty much sort of get all the data we need through the middlewares. And for anything with the streaming, we do have gRPC stream. So any communications within within Brancas, like service to service, would go with the gRPC via communications. And we do have some UI that talks to backend through gRPC as well. So we have a heavy usage of gRPC in our platform. And for logging, I think we're still using Loggers. Good to know about the zero log, Sam. But yeah, pretty much like to add the point for Branca's, in terms of like application monitoring, we have Grafana, and we collect the metadata. All of our logs are standard out, and it goes to the Stackdriver. And in terms of service dependencies for the microservices, and we still have to build out, but I think we're using the open census that's stored in the Google platform as well. But we haven't have any separated like your open source that's running. So we sort of leverage the Google Cloud Platform's components, so far. And I think from Oliver's point, I think he actually put on all the Grafana and things like that. So we're sort of moving towards our own infrastructure, and we wanted to build all the components to open source, and sort of using the open source stuff and leverage our platform. And since it is the payment and fintech platform, we want things to be like more secure. And so all of our secure services are running with SSL, with Let's Encrypt, and all our internal data are stored very secure. So anything that any secure data is going to be encrypted and stored in the back end. So pretty much as how we use it in many of the companies. So, but I actually used AppDynamics in my previous companies for monitoring the microservices to microservices, like to traceability wise. But here it's a bit different. But we have to go that route and see what it is. I'm basically working on a development team, but Oliver is on a DevOps, and he has more knowledge than I am in those areas. But in terms of application, and this is what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gazni. So I think Chad also has something to say about how they're logging on your client side.
Yeah, I mean, Gazni and Oliver really covered our internal software, our internal systems, but we have, and to give some context, a lot of our clients, being banking clients, need to deploy on-site. That's why a lot of these SaaS solutions aren't really on the table for us. So we end up running on-prem on our own hardware or on GCP in the same way that we would deploy to our client's hardware. And so in one of our clients, in our rollout, everything starts with logging. So log to standard out, Kubernetes, use FluentD or FluentBit and collect that in. But for more control there, we've set up an InfluxDB and just hooked that right into Logros, which means no changes on any of the code. Your log lines stay exactly the same. But when you configure your logger, you set up the hook, and all of those logs get fed into Influx. And you can do a lot more with it there in the parsed out form. But once you have Influx there, and once you have a place to store logs and store metrics like that, instrumenting the code becomes just another layer, another powerful layer, especially as you start adding traffic, in that you can see numbers rather than looking at individual log lines. So we started with logs, we added on the instrumentation and the metrics, which now you get your live dashboards with Grafana. You can see what your traffic looks like. You can see your error rates. You can see your error rates by backend, by the type of call coming in from the user. And you start getting into a lot more detail, a lot higher level, but still detailed information where you can start looking at individual backends or individual request paths. And now, so as that traffic increases, that becomes the more valuable piece. You become more metrics focused and less log focused, because logs are now something you only look at for debugging. So your metrics layer now adds into that. And as we add more traffic, as we add more users, that's going to move into distributed tracing, and that's going to bring in that open tracing into the Jaeger interface, most likely. But yeah, that now becomes tying in all the separate backends that we're connected to into our system and trace everything. And now you get, even higher level, but also you get the availability of the detailed information, the detailed data down to the individual call, the individual method on the individual backend. you can collapse that all the way up or dig down and drill down as deep as you need to. But it really builds out in layers. If you start out wanting to do all of the open tracing and Jaeger and everything like that, you're going to spend more time instrumenting your code than writing your code. So, start with logs, start with what we all know and love, from whether it's your print line debugging it locally, or your straight logs in Kubernetes or in wherever you deploy. But then layer on that, layer your metrics, layer your open tracing, layer what you need. Don't try to go beyond what your traffic actually requires. Yeah, so that's what we've learned along the way, and still learning as we go. Yeah. Oh, I think, yeah, thank you. That's all I have for that. But I think, Ben, you have a question here in Slido.
Yeah, there's a question on Slido, but before we go into that,
Go
is
ahead.
there anything else that anyone wants to add before we go into the Q&A? Any discussion that perhaps even the panelists have questions among themselves?
So what is the centralized logging storage you use, Sam? Like Elkstack, or so what is your centralized logging system in FoodPanda?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Datadog.
Oh, okay, the one you mentioned this. Okay, SaaS
Mhm.
Okay.
Actually, yeah. Let me share something here on about this, because I don't think a lot of tools has this feature about detecting patterns in rollups. So you guys can see it, right? My
Yep.
screen. All right. So yeah. So this is our Log Explorer, and Datadog has this feature called patterns, where it detects like patterns on your logs. So you would see sometimes when there's an error or something, you would see like quickly rising up on the trend based on the volume. Another thing that you can see is on the graph. And the cool thing about this graph is that you could roll up different logs that you put into Datadog, where so you could do it something like group by host or by another attribute or something, and then you can select how much time it can roll up. So I think this has been very useful for a lot of things, not just for debugging, but also like performance tuning and stuff. So yeah, yeah, that's how you use it.
So any tools that you use to capture the UI errors, like say for example you have a web interface or mobile apps, and do you capture any errors with those, like web applications or mobile apps, with any automated tools?
Yeah, I think for clients, what our mobile infra and front end infra team uses is Track.js and Crashlytics from Firebase, the standard ones. Mhm. And I'm not sure if it is still covered by observability, but like on-call management, like if for example there's a Crashlytics error or a front end a Track.js error, that's like that has been like flagged as critical, or even like a backend error, say in Datadog, or an AWS alert, say your CPU usage for this, or like the maximum scaling limit has been reached or something. We are using this tool called OpsGenie for managing on-call people. So we have backend developers, several backend developers from different teams who handle critical incident management using these tools. So every week we have set like say from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. you are on call, and like whatever comes your way, you have to prioritize this over your team's work. So something that I'm not sure if it's also part of observability, but like yeah, we practice this process in FoodPanda as well.
I think observability is a sort of a superset of monitoring. So maybe anything that gives us information in terms of infrastructure failures, or the state of infrastructure or the state of application in terms of how the other services are progressing, or maybe something to do with like service dependencies in terms of tracing, or the security, like something goes wrong in the DNS, or service outage, whatnot. So I would say observability is like a super set of monitoring. So anything that brings our application or the platform be in place and solves a lot of the problems, that avoids the human work and keeps us up to date on what is happening. And yeah, it is what it is. No application is running like with all green. I'm sure there's going to be errors, so we need attention from it. So I would say, yep, it's an observability.
Yeah, another thing I want to know is like you said you're using ELK stack for logging, right?
No,
and like
no, no, we're not using. I actually asked you like ELK. I mean, what you've been using. I forgot that you
I
chose the
see.
Datadog. So we were pretty
I
much
see, I see.
sort of right now, leaning on Google Stack at the moment, Stackdriver at the moment.
Yes,
But Oliver has some thoughts and others to bring a centralized storage in place for logs, and yeah, we're still designing on that. But yep, Oliver is working on that work.
I'm actually curious about Stackdriver because I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I don't really know how it works. Like what features there are in Stackdriver compared to the others.
I think
I think it's a
pretty similar to what you showed in Datadog, just not as advanced. They recently upgraded the interface, so it's got like some nice things where you can do various filters, and it's got like a little query language you can use, things like that. So kind of similar to what you showed, but I think Datadog's probably a bit more powerful, or actually a lot more powerful.
Yeah, but I think with the
That- that's-
Stackdriver, still, I mean, it's a text-based log, and then you sort of log this as a structured JSON, and then you sort of query with that and see what's broken. Say, for example, you can create a matrix out of the log, and then you create more and more metrics that gives you visibility on the dashboard. And then, for example, if you log something on a particular value, and then you want to know how many times that happened in a day, you can create a matrix out of it, and then create that matrix as a dashboard. So you build that, and then you customize the dashboard, and then that sort of thing. It's pretty easy to work. It's pretty simple to work with.
Yeah, I think the open source kind of, well, nothing maps entirely to either of the two, but I think Graylog is kind of similar in once you parse everything down out of JSON, then you can kind of start to extract out of it, and similar to where Datadog and Stackdriver are able to.
Ben, how do you guys do your alerting? Sorry.
Sorry?
What do you guys primarily alert on? Like you mentioned the on-call rotation, all that. I think it might be useful to people to know like what we actually do alerts on.
Right. So I think so. Like the policies related to alerting is something that if it's gonna be affected, it's gonna be affecting a customer or a customer's order. You should make sure that there's alerts set up to that. So all things related to it, like I think the standard ones would be the number of like database or Redis connections, or say what other metrics are there that we usually track? I guess response times, but yeah, response times is not really something that we do measure a lot. I think it's mostly like the external calls latency. Like if you do we implement this pattern called circuit breaker in our external calls, wherein when it's getting a lot of errors from an external service, it will just stop connecting to that service because it will most likely be returning an error anyway. So when a circuit breaker is enabled, we have to make sure that there's an alert sent to say AWS or New Relic for that related alert. And we have integrated everything into a central alerting system that that this Ops Genie tool, where it's connected to like email emergencies. So when say a product person or a salesperson creates a ticket, we will also like backend developers will also get an alert. So yeah, AWS alerts like the number of connections to Elastic Cache or RDS, um, or the number of SQS, not the number, but like the oldest age of an SQS item reach a certain threshold. Um, Something related to apps monitoring would be the error rate. Like if it's more than 1%, then we need to send an alert to Opsgenie as well. Yeah, that's how we do it. But yeah, I'm curious about like if you're working like on different clients, how does that work?
Yeah, the big thing that we alert on is really around external dependencies, especially with banks and banking integrations. You start relying on, in Philippines, if you're relying on InstaPay, that means you're relying on not only BSP, but the other bank who's actually receiving the transaction, which could be up, could be down, or it could be delayed extensively, which, you have to cancel that. You have to escape that wait at some point because your customers are waiting. Your client is there staring at their phone, so you can't just wait forever. You have to break out. You have to start doing other mitigations, and that's really what we start to alert on. Say, hey, this bank is slowing down. Go check it out. Either disable it entirely and say, sorry, that's just not available for the time being, or figure out what the actual error is, because those can be, especially around when a bank rolls out their new InstaPay integration. That can be fires everywhere, or it can be a non-issue. So, yeah, those are the big ones. But then, because the knock-on effect is the latency to the user. If your send money is slowing down, if it's taking 10, 20 seconds to send money to somebody or to make a purchase, or the main interaction that you want people to do, that's really got to trigger. That's kind of our second major alert is, all right, it's slowing down. Users are being affected in their purchase, in their sending of money. Go figure out where the latency is. And that's where you got to dive into metrics. We're like, okay, what exactly is causing this slowdown? Yeah, so outside of the normal, is the system down alerts? Those are kind of the two big ones, is the external dependency and the latency to the user.
Yeah, we also generally have dashboards for each client. But as far as alerts go, we also, what I found very useful is there's this thing called Kube State Metrics for Kubernetes. And you can hook that into Prometheus, and it gives you nice things like you can tell if a pod's stuck waiting, things like that. And I think we have a channel on Slack where we generally send all our alerts to. So that often developers will like push something new, and then for some reason the pod will be in like a crash backoff loop for some reason. And then you can immediately see that like after a minute it'll give you an alert. So that's been quite helpful.
All right. Any further questions among the panelists to each other?
I'll share one last thing, actually.
Okay.
So this is our dashboard in New Relic. This is our service, and this is our dashboard. And the cool thing about these, paid tools is that you can easily create like charts, I guess, like something that, my experience using Grafana, it's very limited, but at the same time, what I thought I could see is that you have to, the system is built flexible enough to build this. But the thing with New Relic and Datadog, they're super easy to create these charts, right? So you could just go here and you can send custom attributes to New Relic and Datadog. And you can probably just send like business metrics as well. I think that's what we are leaning towards right now. Like we want to give the insight to developers on how the business is performing. So we started like sending business metrics to our dashboards. This is how it looks like in Datadog, and it's the same thing. Like you could easily add a widget here in this page, and like could be a table or just a value, right? Like it's very easy compared to other tools. And I'm not sure if everyone agrees, but like a proper observability setup for a microservice, or I don't know, like any service would cost some money as well, because like right now our setup right now here in Food Panda, we are only able to, I think, afford to keep our logs for like around 2 weeks, I think. Even with my company before, we were keeping the logs for like around the same time, and when we were doing some cost optimizations, it was usually one of the first things that we usually drop off. Like charts, you don't really need charts apparently, like because like um salespeople would rather look into PowerPoint presentations than like looking at real time charts. But yeah, I'm just some observation from my past companies.
Yeah, logs are really expensive for some companies.
Mm.
I think what the bigger companies do with that problem is they just sample. So they don't store everything. They store every 1,000 metric or whatever randomly sometimes. But yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
Cool.
Okay, so let's go on to our Q&A. There are a lot of questions right now that showed up on Slido. Again, for everyone else, if you have any questions, please go to Slido. Okay, that's slido.com, and then enter the code number 40196. All right. Now, before I go to any of these questions first, there's one question that I have over on Brancas, because if I got this correctly, Gazni, you said that Brancas has plans of creating a homebrew logging system. Is that
Say that
correct?
again.
I think I don't know if I heard that correctly. Brancas has plans of making a homebrewed logging system.
No, I think so. Basically, for now, we're using Google Stackdriver. So what I said was we're going to be putting our centralized logging stories like Elk Stack or ELF or whatnot. So we're going to be deploying in our own, infrastructure.
All right. Okay, that clears it up. All right. So let's have our first question here. So the first speaker, that would be Ben. The first speaker who talked about logging. What is the best namespacing strategy? Use package names for namespace, or name of the action conducted on a feature namespace?
I think it depends if the package names are written in, like, if they're in English, then yeah, you could use package names. I mean, some microservice setups, like they assign some weird names to their services, right? So I don't think that would be helpful. So I would say that I mean, either use a different naming, like change your naming strategy, or use a different namespacing approach. But yeah, what we use is that since we required everyone to not use any weird names on their microservices, we just use the like the namespace is like this, like it's the cluster name, the environment, the country, the region, the country, and then the microservice name. Yeah, that's how we do it.
Is that how it's done as well in Brancas?
Yep. So we do deploy in the Kubernetes. So So we trace the log with the Kubernetes namespaces in the Google Cloud Platform. So that gives you the granular level of looking at, is it this particular namespace, and what's the container or part, and so basically it goes through all the deployment. So you can see if it's like more than one instance, you can pick an instance and see what log it is, or at least pick a deployment name, and then you get a consolidated log from every instances that is running on a particular Kubernetes deployment. So, and with the Google Cloud Platform, you can also search for the logs, and it's pretty easy to find bugs and filtering.
Yeah, it's similar with our client integrations. You have namespaces aligned with major functionality, and then you can namespace by what individual gRPC service, what endpoint, and now you're down to the actual individual method call. So that can narrow you down very quickly.
Yeah, sometimes
Okay.
we also try to put the function names or method names before we log something, so we know exactly which functions those logs are coming from. Sometimes it's very useful to debug.
Okay, let's go on to the next question. So, can someone expound how they apply observability versus simply monitoring or logging and querying the logs? How does it impact your process?
So like I
This
said,
kind of goes into, go ahead, guys.
So like I said, observability is like a superset of monitoring. So logging and querying the logs are pretty much logging is something that we need to do for all the services anyway. But for querying the logs, you can do manually, or instead of looking at the text, it'll be easier if you look at the graphs. So that's why we need monitoring in place to go over those logs and take metrics out of it. And observability, I would say, not just for monitoring the logs, but then also tracing the request from one service to another until it exits the firewall. So it's everything connected. I wouldn't say it's a different thing. It's all subset that brings all together. Chad, yeah, I mean, you can proceed. Sorry.
Yeah, that really covers it. So logging is at the event level. So one log point is this event happened, and you can give context to the event. Monitoring is a higher level of that. So you summarize all these events into a status. Is it up? Is it down? Is it degraded? Are you getting a high error rate? That's a summary of the logged events. And then observability is monitoring across the network. So this isn't just one service that you're monitoring. This is now an entire system. This is multiple services that have to work together in order to service a request. So monitoring is always at the service level, but you're going to monitor multiple services at the same time. And observability is really connecting that monitoring across network calls. Yeah. So like I said, you start with the individual event, and you can move up to a service monitoring, and you can move up into a system observability.
Yeah, I think to answer that question maybe more precisely is that what you really want to do is you either want to be, so you're going to have on your services and maybe your application as a whole, you're going to have service level indicators, right? Which determine whether your service is healthy or in good shape. And then generally, like the point of observability, I think, is either to improve that service level indicator, like maybe a product guy wants something like faster user response times or something, or you want to obviously something's broken, you want to fix it and find the root cause and restore that service to be healthy again. So I think your approach generally must support those use cases rather than caring about logging or metrics or anything. And I think probably the way forward with that is the open tracing project, and just I think tracing is something that unites logs and metrics in a way which lets you find, like, especially in a microservice, which actual service is broken, because that's usually the problem. And usually when you're just staring at some graphs or logs, you can't really pinpoint exactly what's going wrong. And I think that's where traces can help a lot.
Ben, you have anything to add?
I would say like yeah, they're different because even like in Datadog or New Relic, they're separate products. Like logging is a product that has a different pricing scheme than monitoring. So yeah.
All right. Okay. So next question is for Ben. Are you using any integration between Opsgenie and Firebase Crashlytics?
Yeah, I think Opsgenie supports like probably hundreds of integrations. I mean, it even supports Zapier, which basically you can basically just connect everything. It supports like from Tracklist. It supports REST API. Like if you want like your microservice to send an alert directly to Opsgenie, like if something happens that's super critical, you can send a alert directly to it. And yeah, I think an open source alternative for this would be Nagios, if I'm not, yeah, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next question. Okay. How do you set up logging? Is everything into standard out? And who handles routing of logs per service? I guess we
So-
could start with
Right.
Gazni.
Essentially for logging, I would say it's not something that needs to be bonded to the application, because application instance has to do what it needs to do for running that service. But for logging, my idea was to, or my way of doing is that you print everything to std out, and then don't care about the logs, and then let the orchestrator or Kubernetes, or if you put a like FluentD or something, log shipper, that takes care of the logs that shipping to the centralized location. And yeah, it shouldn't be in the application layer itself. So that needs to be separated out.
Yeah, I'd agree with Ghazni. Pretty much just always log to standard out, and then use some kind of forwarder like FluentD or FluentBit, or there's a ton of them, and just use that to aggregate your logs.
Chad, Ben.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Just to add, like it's very important to add the proper log levels. We are also using SED out for all logging. But yeah, what I meant by log levels would be debug, info, notice, and error. I mean, those four that's our standard for our company. But I think for other companies, they're also using like trace and notice and other stuff. And but yeah, something that should be practiced.
Yeah, pretty much structured logs are kind of good, because then you can, after storing them in a centralized place, you can query them and see what's going on. You can build some dashboard out of it, and a lot of things can happen with structured logging. So, please use structured logging if you are not.
Chad, is this the same on the client side?
Yeah, the only difference is some of those, like I talked about, hooking into the logger for shipping logs directly to InfluxDB. That's the only exception I would put to the standard out, where either Kubernetes is taken care of, or AWS, or wherever you deploy it is taking care of your logs. But if you're going to put your log collector or your log aggregator into your system, make sure it goes directly into your logger. It should not change any of your application code. Like, it should be one line in main where you configure your logger and say, oh, by the way, anything you log, send here. And everything else should be completely invisible to all the service code.
All right. Okay, I think here's one for the people in Brancas. For services deployed for banks, how much granular context can be shared or logged for a system being observed to be PCI compliant?
the biggest part around PCI compliance is really around where the data is located and who has access to that data. So the restrictions, the big ones on PCI compliance are, or PCI DSS are, don't log, well, username, password, the obvious ones, but don't log account numbers. Don't log credit card numbers. Don't log, like anything that can be used to make a payment cannot go in the logs ever. Just don't do it. It doesn't matter where that data is going, just don't do it. So those are the big keys. If you can use that data to actually create a new transaction, it can't go in the logs. Once you knock out your account numbers and your like user pins or something like that, it's really only a few fields that you really need to keep an eye on. But outside of that, really it's around where the logs are going. And that's why nearly every bank, well, every bank in Philippines, but nearly every bank in the world keeps their logs inside the house. Like they're not tying into Stackdriver or Datadog or any SaaS solution because they want to own it and they have to. Like inspectors will get very serious about, okay, you're sending your logs out of the system, where are they going? So really, as long as you own top to bottom all of your logs, then you can also maintain your retention, which is, there's some crazy retention specs around banks, which can be in the years. So there's a lot of compressed logs sitting around a lot of places. And that's why you got to be very conscientious when you put your log lines in, what's going into it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really only a few fields you got to pay attention to. But beyond that, where's it go?
All right. Okay, so speaking of length of logs or the lifetime of the logs. So Ben mentioned that they dropped logs past 2 weeks. Is there a need to archive logs, Ben?
Yeah, we do archive that. Actually, like I'm not sure what the setup is actually for Foodpanda, but in my previous company, I used to send everything to Glacier.
Okay.
Mm.
So they still
But yeah,
get archived.
yes, because like if I'm doing like performance tuning for say an application, it would really be helpful if I have like the whole spectrum, like from like probably I usually use like past 6 months, past 3 months worth of data to identify how much tuning I need to do.
Oh, okay, sorry, Marker. But is there a limit to that archiving? Like, I mean, does it stop to make sense past beyond a certain period of time where you're not looking, you're not gaining any new learnings from say 2 years, 3 years down?
I can't really tell because like.
Or is it just like you just want to have it just because it's nice to have? It's nice to...
Yeah, the setup's automated anyway, so like I don't really have to maintain the setup. So, but yeah, I haven't really used anything that's like older than like, 3 months or 6 months.
Okay, so same question as well for Broncos, because Chad mentioned earlier that about saving the data or saving the logs because for PCI compliance and banks. How long do you keep the archive for your own logs when it comes to financial companies?
Really comes down to, depends on your regulator. But for the most part, for transaction logs and payment logs, it's 1 or 2 years. And that's strictly for that exact payment. For banks, like the banking clients, I've seen as long as 5 years for certain types of interactions.
So even though there's no
really comes
data
down to
inside it. So even though there's no,
how much you're willing to pay for storage.
So there's really, even though there's no account data or there's no privacy, there's no private data involved in it, you still have to store it for the amount of time as per regulations.
Yeah, the regulators are really around audits there. So they want to audit, especially around fraud schemes. They want to be able to go back a year, 2, 3 years and say, okay, what this account, this user account, what did they do? Like, let's start tracking their pattern of transactions or of just interactions with the bank. And that's where they start building their cases around, identity theft, fraud, and these types of things, which, kind of relevant to the region in recent years. But yeah, that's why regulators really want to keep this around so long. And it really seems arbitrary, but it's around them, investigating fraud. And that's what it comes down to.
But I guess this is not regulatory, right? I mean, it's just because there might be an audit, right? But it's not mandated by any law that they need to maintain these logs for X number of years.
It's not specific to laws. It's the regulations. I haven't looked at them too long in Philippines, but it's around your depositor interactions need to be auditable back X amount of time.
I
And
think
that's
in
really what
Philippines
covers
it's
it.
five.
I think it's either 5 or 7. I'm not sure which country is which, but yeah, it's not specific to logs. It's not specific to digital assets. We need to be able to audit your depositors' interactions for 5
Right.
years.
And it's however you make that available, right? Whether it's paper trail or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Instead of filling rooms with paper, we're filling them with hard drives now. It's the same audits.
Oh, this is going to be interesting though, because with Brancas, you're not just dealing with financial institutions in the Philippines. You're dealing with financial institutions in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Thailand right now, right? And there would be obviously transactions between these countries, and not just within the country. I could imagine how observing these transactions happen just within a country and how to keep track of those observations. How do you deal with several other countries that have different regulations and let's say, for example, how you deal with observability in the Philippines is maybe different from that in Indonesia, for example. How do you deal with the differences when it comes to the point that it needs to be reconciled across countries?
Yeah, some of the regulations, which they don't make it easier, they shift the pain more or less, in that because data needs to be on site in the Philippines, it needs to be on site, it needs to be in country in Indonesia, it needs to be in country in Thailand, and only some information can move to the cloud in Vietnam. So because the data is forced to be at these specific locations, then you can kind of follow that with your monitoring and your observability. And that way you're seeing the different systems in the different countries as separate entities entirely. And now because the system in Thailand isn't talking directly to the system in Indonesia, the observability doesn't really need to cover that. All of that system is deployed into Thailand, and it all stays there. All of the monitoring and observability stays really around that deployment.
Okay.
So it's painful to put the deployments in all these different places, but it makes the observability slightly easier.
All right. So I guess that was the last question. Anything else you gentlemen would like to add?
I guess I can add something to the logging point. I think everybody would, in general, want to store all the logs forever if they can, because it's just, if you ever want to look back at something, you can. All it depends is what your ingestion rate is, I guess, and what kind of scale you're operating at. That's usually the determining factor of whether you can archive everything or not.
Ben?
Yeah. I have a list here actually about like several things I haven't mentioned yet. Would be having like health check and heartbeat endpoints. Health check, I think this is something used by Kubernetes for their readiness and liveness probe. But yeah, I mean, I think it's only in our company, but what I noticed is that health check we are using like health check endpoints we are using for web apps, and like heartbeat is used mostly for background tasks. And yeah, so what else? Transactions, yeah. So like I mentioned already about the request ID, which is like being created on the clients and then being passed to the backend through HTTP headers. And same with background tasks, we create a task ID as well, and we put everything in. Logging everything related to background tasks under this task ID, and error rates. Yeah, something that it's better logged early than late, right? So like usually we set everything to 1% and then we log everything. We send an alert to Opsgenie. And yeah, lastly was the logging standards, which is like very, very important. Yeah.
Are you doing all your own tracing, or are you using some kind of library for it? Are you using open tracing, or are you just like putting your own trace idea and stitching it together yourself, or do you have some way of like creating that trace afterwards?
Yeah, we use the Datadog tool for tracing. We don't have to use everything together. Mm-hmm.
So unless there is a requirement for like how long we need to store the data as a log, like Chad mentioned, it's up to an engineering team to decide like how long it would be useful for us to look at the monitoring, or if it's not really useful, you don't have to store logs that long, unless it's a financial sector. But otherwise, could be like months, maybe 30 days. Should be fine in my opinion, but it really depends on people and how long the data is being useful for the application.
Has there ever been a time when any of you ended up, making your own because the feature was not available in the system that you were using?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. Has there ever been a time wherein any of you were forced to create a new feature for to use for observability of your systems, just because it was not available in the system that your company is currently using?
Yeah,
I haven't done it personally, but yeah, Chad.
Yeah, one. There were a few metrics reporting libraries for exporting metrics to InfluxDB. And there was one issue is the API changed. So 1.8 and 2.0 have a different API than previous versions. So it kind of cut out all of the old metrics reporters. And the ones that were tied onto the new ones were either awkward, or they wouldn't let us add fields or add tags to that metrics point. And we spent a few days trying to get these integrated, and it did not work right. So we tore all that out and created our own metrics reporter because we wanted to report the gRPC as well as the external calls as separate data points. And we built our own to end up doing it. And it turned out working, but there was a lot of frustration trying to integrate another solution.
Nothing on the Food Panda end, Ben?
From my previous company with Carmudi, apparently most monitoring tools, they only support like CPU and memory logging, but not the system load. Like if you type uptime in Unix, right? Like you would get this three numbers, like the load average. So it doesn't support that. So I built a custom tool to do that, just to get something similar to New Relic. They have this metric called AppDex, which is like the number that represents the whole performance of your application. So I was looking for something similar outside of New Relic, and I had to do this load average thing.
All right. So there are no further questions on Slido. No last any last words from everyone else?
Got a quick question. So how do we monitor,
Okay.
do we monitor the logs from the queuing systems? Like, do you guys use the queue systems as the messages between the services, or how do you monitor those? If yes.
Yeah, I was just doing that actually. So yeah, we pass all messages received from an SQS queue in the context, and like everything is logged, because I think that's very important for debugging. Yeah, so we record everything.
Okay. Yeah, especially
I think
required for the
S-
async processing.
Yeah, so I think SQS does its own back pressure. Is that correct? I haven't touched that in a while.
Yeah, it's used for that. Yes.
I guess there's one other thing I can mention. We have a lot of scrapers that we use to log into someone's bank account and fetch their statement or do a payment transfer or something like that. And these things can be quite finicky. So we basically built something where when a step fails for whatever reason, it will kind of send us a screenshot of before and after. So you can kind of see like what the page looked like, and it will usually send it to the team's Slack channel. So it kind of helps us debug these sort of things quickly.
Okay, so that's all the time we have left. So before we end this, there's a few words that we want that the people from Brancas and Food Panda would like to say. Marco, would you like to start for Brancas?
No, let's start with Ben.
Okay.
Ben, you want to say something?
Ben, would you like to say something? Or maybe there's something you want to announce from Food Panda?
Right. Yeah. So we're still hiring for all roles related to software engineering, like from mobile engineers, Android and iOS, to QA, to back end and front end. But right now, I think it's still limited to just people local in Singapore, unless you really have a great profile. Then we would probably consider remote. But yeah, right now it's close to Singaporeans or like people staying in Singapore.
Any link that they can go to for for those who might be in Singapore right now?
Yeah, careers.foodpanda.com. You can go to foodpanda.com and like click careers there, and then yeah, you will see all the different job postings. So it has everything from tech to sales and marketing, and yeah, all those things.
Okay. So Marco, on your end?
Yeah. Same with Brancas. So as you know, Brancas is a fintech company based here in Southeast Asia. We are building the infrastructure for open banking in the region. So we're always looking for good talent, especially around software development. If you're a really talented software developer, we're always keen on hiring new people. So yeah, you can find out more about us on our website. Let me just share my screen. Not yet, of course. So let me share my screen. Yeah. So brank.as/careers, right? And then you should see all the fun positions that you can apply for. Yeah. So we are even before COVID, we're a remote first company. So yeah, you can practically be anywhere in the world. And as long as you're a good fit, you should be able to feel free to apply essentially. And then one other thing that we want to promote is, so we're having a 2-part masterclass One is part one will be on open banking APIs and architectures at scale. To be
July 29th.
it's a masterclass that's going to be given by our CTO Kenneth Shaw. This is going to be on July 29, 2020. So it's actually a Zoom webinar. You can find the information on our Facebook. So you just go on Facebook and search for Brancas. It should be in one of the more recent posts there. Part two will be building API products that your customers love on the next day. That will be July 30, 2020 by Mike Dickinson, our CPO or Chief Product Officer. So this should be, this should be a really interesting free masterclass, by the way. These are both free to attend and participate in. That's it on my end, I think, unless the other guys would want to say something. Gazni, Oliver, and Chad.
I don't have anything.
Okay.
You pretty much covered.
Yeah, same here.
All right, cool.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's it. Well,
Okay.
I mean, thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time and bearing with a little bit of technical difficulties in the beginning, and Chad for coming in clutch. Sorry we couldn't get your video feed, but I mean, you had your famous mug on there anyway, so it should be fine. Anyway, thanks, and stay safe, everyone. And see you next Go Manila Monday. Bye.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
For the panelists, you can stay on if you want to.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks. Good job.
Okay.